over the last little while, you know, the Canadian public is seeing what we've seen in the Parliament for all this time. They're seeing a Prime Minister who will not answer questions. Only now, instead of not answering the questions from the opposition, he doesn't answer the questions from the media. You know, he's like some kind of, I don't know, some sort of a general or something, you know, so from another space and times of going through a campaign and saying, well, you only get to ask 5 questions. And even those questions I won't really answer. This is Canada. This is a democracy. This is a place where we dialogue and exchange, where we don't take too seriously, with great respect to Mr. Harper, we don't think that you're living in another universe. We don't think you're somebody higher and mightier and better than the rest of us. We think you're just the same as us. And you need to answer questions, and you need to engage with Canadians, and you need to debate the issues with Canadians. And that's the kind of leader that we want to have, and that's the kind of Prime Minister we want to have, and that's why we want to have a Prime Minister whose name is Michael Ignatieff. That's the leader we want to have. That's what we want to see. So I do see this election as being about character. It's about the character of this government. It's the most secretive government we've ever seen. It's probably the most authoritarian government we've ever seen. It's a government that restricts us from having information as the general public. We can't get access to information. Everything is a state secret. We were told by the government when we asked, can you tell us how much revenue you're losing because of the corporate income taxes? They said, that's a cabinet secret. What? Since when? I mean, I've been around a bit. I've seen different budgets in government. No one has ever said how much you're spending on a subject. And then they say, well, we need to know what the jets are going to cost. They say, I'm sorry, that's a cabinet secret. And then we need to know what the prisons are going to cost. They say, sorry, you can't see that. That's a cabinet secret as well. So the parliamentary budget officer, who's appointed by Mr. Harper, says MPs can't do their job. You can't do your job if you don't get answers to questions which are quite basic and fundamental to what it's. You go back to Magna Carta. You go back to the barons at Runnymede and King John. You go back to Charles I. You go back to our constitutional history, going back into British history and beyond. What's the fundamental question? It's the power of the purse. And it's the ability of Parliament to say, we have to authorize the spending every year. We have to give you the okay for the spending that you want to do. This government wants to just do it without Parliament say so, without our authorization. It's wrong. Now, it makes it easier when Mr. Ignatieff moves into Sussex Drive, because there's only 2 pieces of furniture in the whole place. A throne and a mirror. But it's also an election about substance. Because from this difference in character, which Canadians are now seeing, they're seeing Michael Ignatieff out talking to people. They're seeing him engaging in talking to audiences across the country. They're seeing how this works, how a democracy is supposed to function, how a parliamentary system is supposed to work. But it's also about the difference in our priorities. And here again, it's interesting. Everyone has agreed on certain things. What we disagree is how do we get there? I'll give you a couple of examples. We're all agreed that we need to balance the budget. No one likes the country to be in deficit for too long, because we went into deficit because of the recession. Now the recession is ending. We've got to get ourselves onto a path where we're taking in more than we're spending. There's universal agreement on this question. When we went through the last bad recession in the early 1990s, all governments took the pledge and said, we're going to have to deal with this problem at every provincial level. We're going to have to deal with it nationally. And we went through quite a lot of pain to get there, but we got there. And we're not going to miss out again on what we need to do. We all recognize it. But there's a difference between the Conservatives and the Liberals. Because what the Conservatives said to the banks and the oil companies, you guys look like you're having a really tough time. And we don't think you're keeping enough money, that you need more. And so we're going to reduce the tax rate from 18% to 16.5% as of January 1st, and then to the onerous rate of 15% next year. Again, we all agree our tax rates need to be competitive, but we don't think they need to go down to zero to be competitive. And we do know that it costs money to run the programs we need to run, and therefore those who are in a position to pay should be in a position to pay. So our leader has said we're going to keep the rates at 18%, which is competitive according to all comparisons with other countries, more competitive, lower than the United States, lower than other countries, but we're not going to reduce them to zero, and we're going to delay further reductions until the budget is balanced. Now, you may have noticed that after the election was called, because of the contempt citation from the Speaker and the vote in the House of Commons, you may have noticed that Mr. Harper then came out with a new promise. He said we're going to allow people to split their incomes up to $50,000 so they'll be able to reduce the tax rate. But, he said, there's a small catch. The catch is I have to get a majority at least once, maybe twice. And we're not going to give you your tax break until 2015. However, we are going to give the tax break to the banks and the oil companies. You sort of say to yourself, often people say to Canadians, you know, there's really no difference between the parties. It's all the same. Sometimes you'll hear New Democrats talk about the old parties. You know, they're all the same. Well, this isn't one of those elections where that line has any credibility at all. Because what we know and what we see very clearly is that there actually is a choice. Now, it's not a choice between someone saying, let her rip, we're going to let the deficit go forever, we're going to spend, and tax, and that's our approach. No one's campaigning on that platform. What we are saying is, let's think of giving a break to families first and making the banks and the oil companies wait their turn. Yeah. That's the position. That's the position the Liberal Party is taking. And it's a very simple choice because Mr. Harper is saying, no. Let's give the break to the oil companies and the trust companies and the insurance companies and the banks and let the Canadian people wait their turn. That's Mr. Harper's platform. I think it's a terrible platform, but if he wants to stand on it, let him stand on it. But that is the choice. The choice is between a government whose focus is going to be on families, on health care, on what is actually happening to working families after a very tough recession, and a government whose focus is, according to themselves, spending $30 billion on an untendered program, building mega prisons in an adventure which has failed in every country and in every jurisdiction in which it has been tried, and giving priority to those who are the most wealthy and the most successful, our banks and our oil companies, instead of giving it to families. So the choice is very clear. The line that some people use to me to say, well, all you politicians are the same, and there is no choice in this election, there's a very real choice. And I think those choices will become clearer and clearer to Canadians in the last 3 weeks of the campaign. And this is those of you getting a little glassy-eyed, this is the conclusion of what I want to say before we get into the Q&A. The conclusion is quite simple. We have a job to do in this constituency, as we do across the country, in persuading all kinds of people who may have voted some other way before, or whose traditional political home may be somewhere else, to bring them to the Liberal Party, because this is an election in which a vote for the Liberals is a vote not simply to poke your finger in Mr. Harper's eye, or to say, I want to send a message to Stephen Harper, but to recognize that this is an election in which we have to replace Stephen Harper with a new government and a new Prime Minister. That's what we have to do. So there are a lot of people, particularly in this community, there are a lot of people who've come here from all over Canada. I don't know why. I can't imagine. Like, what is it about, what's so special about having the mountains in the background and the ocean in front of you and the weather beautiful, the golf courses are all around, and I don't know what the hell everybody's doing here. But there are people from all over, from different political traditions, from different parts of the country. And they remember the Progressive Conservative Party. Well, this is not your grandma's or even your own Progressive Conservative Party. This is a different bunch. This is a Reform Party that's done a reverse takeover and gotten rid of the name Progressive. And not just gotten rid of the name Progressive, they've gotten rid of all of what was lay underneath that. And that's what we're dealing with. And yeah, there are, of course, New Democrats. I mean, having been one myself for a considerable time, it's a tradition that I understand, and I respect it in many, many ways. But we have to understand the pace at which the world is changing, and also understand that it isn't the same world that it was 20, 30, 50, 70 years ago. And that it's a world that requires some different sets of choices and some different other kinds of compromises that need to be made. And compromise is not a bad word. Any New Democrat who's been in government knows that. It's a necessary word. And so we've got to appeal to those folks and say, people who are coming up from Saskatchewan and Manitoba, where those New Democrats have been in government for a long while, and Alan Blakeney, it's not exactly a revolutionary soul. Roy Romano and Gary Doer, these people ran governments that ran surpluses and that understood the compromises that needed to be made and that knew that you had to govern from the middle. And that is the test that we're running. And so the Liberal Party has to become home for all of these groups, as well as of those who voted Green in the past. And say, yeah, we need to get on a sustainable path, but we also need to make sure that our vote is counted and make sure that our vote leads to the greater direction in which we all want to go. And that is what it seems to me this election is about, and that's what Mike represents. Mike represents someone who speaks for the community, who's been involved and engaged in the community, and where we have to bring all the sources of the community together to get him elected. And we've got 3 weeks in which to do it. And let me tell you something. 3 weeks in politics is a long time. A lot of things can happen in 3 weeks. We've already seen it happen. Somebody was saying to me about the polls, well, he said, you're still behind. I said, yeah, we're still behind. Let me tell you a story. When I ran in Ontario in 1990, the first week of the campaign, I was 30 points behind the leader. 30 points behind. At the end of the campaign, I was 4 points ahead. Momentum is everything. And people changing their mind is everything. I was asking Doug coming in, I said, how's the money coming? She said, better than ever before. I said, that's a sign. That's a sign. That's a sign that people are coming in, unless Mike's got lots of friends, he just says, come on. I don't think that's what's happening. It's a sign that people are coming together, people realizing sign locations going up, people coming in, more volunteers than ever before. And there's a quiet something going on. I saw it in Powell River, I saw it last night in Vancouver, in North Vancouver as well. You see it everywhere. People coming up, walking down the street, people waving, honking a horn in the corner in Vancouver, not trying to hit me, just trying to wave, trying to say hello. People wanting to make sure that they knew we were ready for them. Our leader running a very good campaign, engaging every day, getting a good response from crowds. We've had thousands of people. We've had crowds, I'm not exaggerating, a crowd of 1,000 people in the South Shore of Montreal, a crowd of 1,100 in Hamilton 2 nights ago. There are big groups of people coming out to see the leader. And this is a big deal. There's something going on out there. And we have to recognize that we just have to do more to make sure it keeps on going and it keeps happening.